Speaker, in relation to Quadrilla, the gentleman in question, I believe, left the company 10 years ago, so he's somewhat out of date in terms of the company that he purports to represent. The current management of Quadrilla are in favour of this. I think local support is important, and one of the things the companies who want to drill for shale gas will have to do will come up with packages that are attractive to local communities, and that, I think, ensures that people actually get some financial reward from shale gas being extracted near them.
Ruth Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to press my right honourable friend further on this issue of how community support is going to be defined and measured, because I have many concerned constituents who want to know that they have a genuine route to rejecting fracking applications that don't have local support, and I'm still not clear what that would be.
Mr. Speaker, there are parts of the country, particularly in relation to nuclear, where local consent and support is very enthusiastic for the development of additional energy sites. So it is perfectly possible to measure and see local support.
Bill Esterson.
The homes of people living near to the Altcar Moss proposed fracking site shook as a result of the tests that he referred to earlier. The Secretary of State said shale gas was safe, but his government paid compensation to residents living near fracking sites in Lancashire. This government's own report says little progress has been made in reducing and predicting the risks. When is he finally going to admit that fracking is a non-starter in this country?
Well, in relation to seismic activity, there is no particular similarity with that from mining, and that mining is not subject to seismic limits.
Sir Greg Knight.
Mr. Speaker, despite what he said, is it not the case that forecasting the occurrence of seismic events as a result of fracking remains a challenge to the experts? Is it not therefore creating a risk of an unknown quantity to pursue shale gas exploration at the present time?
Yes.
Is he aware the safety of the public is not a currency in which some of us choose to speculate?
Mr. Speaker, unusually I disagree with my right honourable friend that it is all a matter of proportionality, and that, as I pointed out, the movement on the ground level that we have from construction is more than double is about double that we have had from any instance with shale gas. So we know what has happened before. There are not limits on mining. There are not limits on ordinary oil extraction. It is only shale gas that has these limits, and there is no evidence that shale gas is worse than any of these other activities. So I think on a balance of risks, my right honourable friend is not coming to the right conclusion.
Dame Angela Riedel.
Much, Mr. Speaker. I take it a bit rich from the self-styled minister for the 19th century that he thinks the CEO of Quadrilla is out of date. His manifesto said that we will not support fracking unless the science shows categorically that it can be done safely. Exactly. The science has not proved categorically that it can be done safely. So he is reneging on his solemn promise, which all of them stood on, to the British people in 2019. This is not a legitimate thing for this government to do, is it?
Mr. Speaker, we must reiterate, or I must reiterate, that the former Chief Executive of Quadrilla resigned 10 years ago. He does not represent the company, and that is important, and the House would be put under a misapprehension if it were to think that he were currently involved. As regards the last manifesto, I happily stood on the last manifesto because I had read the 2012 report that went through most of the myths against shale gas and showed that they were wrong and that the extraction of shale gas is safe.
Scott Benton.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State will be aware of the strong objections which many of my constituents have to fracking. The Prime Minister has been quite clear in saying it will only take place if there is strong local support for it. However, this poses many questions. What is a local community and how do you define that? How do you ascertain whether or not it can command local support? And what incentives, if any, are going to be provided to local communities to have fracking imposed upon them? My constituents are understandably anxious about fracking returning to the Fylde coast. And so when will they receive an answer to some of these questions?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend asks a very important question, because it is important for the national interest that we have secure supplies of gas. That is something important across the House to all constituents. But this will affect some residents much, much more than others, and therefore it is only right that they are compensated and that they receive some financial benefit for the inconvenience that they will have. Now, I would say to my honourable friend that the majority of the inconvenience does not actually come from the extraction of shale gas, but it comes from the building of the shale gas well in the first place and the lorry movements that are associated with that. And it is important that people benefit and are rewarded for doing something that is in the national interest.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, what studies has the Secretary of State taken of the effect on aquifers where fracking has taken place that are deeply polluted and run well beyond the local community that is seeking the support for to introduce fracking back into this country? Surely he must understand the dangers of this are going to be here for decades and decades to come, long after whatever small amounts of gas have been extracted, and it's future generations that will suffer because of this policy.
Mr. Speaker, it's no surprise that I disagree with the right honourable gentleman. I would refer him to the 2012 report that was done that went through this and went through what had happened in the United States for comparison purposes. First of all, it found that the evidence on pollution of aquifers was not actually any good, that most of the stories were invented or were scare stories, but in addition to that, the UK has a very good regulatory regime, so the combination of ignoring the scare stories and decent regulation means that one can be confident that aquifers will not be damaged.